Melanated family, back for another Thursday. I'm happy to be here with everybody today. I got my sister Sonia Williams Lewis in the building with me. This is the Melanated Convo podcast, if you don't know, right?
Right.
Different ways you can find this show. You can go to the Melanated Convo on YouTube. That's where you can find the videos of what we do here. On Facebook, I love all my people on Facebook. You can go there to watch the show visually. All the streaming platforms. If you don't want to look at my face, you know what I mean? I don't see why you would never mind.
Right.
But if you don't want to, if you don't got time to watch things visually, if you go to Spotify, Apple Podcasts, anywhere you can find a digital podcast, you can find this show. Like, share, tell your friends, tell your mama and them. We gonna be here. You feel me?
Right.
Now, on the show today, this is my Thursday partner, right? Every Thursday, me and this sister, we bring news. We bring our perspective on news stories, the state of Black culture, and we can never talk about this enough until things have been changed. So on the show with me today, Sonia Williams Lewis, the creator of Ascribe Educational Consulting. This is a sister who's been a teacher for over 20 years, so she know what she's talking about. I'm so blessed to have her on the show with me. How you doing today, Sonia?
I'm fabulous. I'm fabulous. It's Thursday. That means it's close to Friday. That means,
Mhm.
we have some downtime and then we gonna do it all over again.
Yep. So on the show, everybody, we're going to discuss a few important issues that we've seen taking place in our community. The first thing we're going to touch on, though, right? In Texas, there's a sister. This is a young sister, 20-year-old sister in Texas. Her name is Zkira Kemp,
Yeah.
right? Zkira Kemp. This is a young sister who is a college student. You know, her mother is trusting her to go off on her own to a degree and explore the college world. This sister went on like a vacation, a weekend vacation with a couple of her friends. To make a long story short, the mom ends up getting a phone call saying that her daughter is dead.
Yeah.
Reports say that this young sister was with her friends. Something transpired. She was driving, got into a car accident, ends up killing herself. The individuals in the car did not die. These
Yeah.
are all college students. They go to Prairie View A&M, I think it is, in
Yeah.
Texas. So these young people, probably doing what young people do. But the interesting part is the mother, she's not subtle with everything that's going on. Like the autopsy report, how she's receiving information isn't making sense to her.
Yeah.
The height and weight of the person they say died in the crash isn't the height and weight of her daughter. So Sonia,
Yeah.
we seen incidents like this before, where we have Black young women go off outside of their home and nefarious things happen.
Yeah.
So as Black parents, right, what do you think we can do looking at this situation with this young sister? Because it could have been her driving. In this, they drinking, being young people, that
Right.
happens. Or we dealing with this system. We can never take this. We can never let this system off the hook. She's talked her mother, the woman who had her, feels like
Right.
there's some things going on incorrectly. So when you see things like this, how do we frame this as Black parents?
One of the things that sticks out in this story to me is the fact that there's that thing that we talked about a little bit last week, and we've kind of had a theme about talking about when it comes to getting information from systems that are designed to control us, right?
Mm.
And so, can I trust the information that's coming from someone who doesn't love my child like I love my child, right? And so that's part of the equation that we really and truly have to take seriously. The second part of it that strikes a chord to me, I'm the mother of 6 Black boys. And sometimes we get in this dynamic as Black parents and even in other communities as how we parent our boys versus how we parent our girls. But what I will say is that I can remember being young. I can remember going to parties where I probably shouldn't have drank a little bit of something.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I never got caught up in the world of peer pressure along the line of drugs. I've never even smoked a joint before. And that's not to say that I'm shaming anyone who has, because I've been in the room with folks who have. I just remember my mother being very insistent about, I need to know who your friends are. So before a stranger comes and gets you to take you anywhere, I want to know who you're going to be with.
Hmm.
Secondarily, if she could mitigate any additional harm to my life based on the relationships and people that I hung out with, she wanted to, if this person was repetitive coming over to the house or I was hanging out with, she wanted to know who their parents were. Now, flip ahead, my generation, I internalized that as my parents care about my safety and well being.
Yep.
My young gentlemen that I've raised range in age from 28 to 10.
Hmm.
My oldest, I can remember when Trayvon Martin was murdered. And we had to shift everything because we live in Elk Grove, which is a suburb of Sacramento. And we kind of let the reins off a little bit because my husband grew up in Sunnydale of San Francisco. I grew up in Bushrod of Oakland. So there was a different, when you compare that to a Elk Grove, I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
we've given our children a sense of privilege to a certain degree, not to be in dangerous neighborhoods and situations.
Mm-hmm.
So with that being said, we have to weigh the how serious of a danger could they be in. Now, the additional thing that goes into this piece is, have we given them the tools and the keys to go into the world away from us to college and things and be okay?
Mm-hmm.
And I just remember when I went away to Atlanta to college, I'm a California girl, that my mother could not drive to me. She could not catch a flight to me because she couldn't afford to. But I knew that I needed to check in at least every 3 or 4 days by
Mm-hmm.
phone. We wrote letters back then. And so I feel for a mother who says, that's not my child. Or
That's not my
give
child.
me
Yeah.
the evidence that says that my child, where's the skid report from the vehicle if there was an accident.
Mm-hmm.
Give me the fire report and how it burst into flames if there was a fire that you ultimately took her life. Give
Mm-hmm.
me those details. And so that goes back again to my first point of, who do we trust to be the disseminators of information? Because that's key and crucial to our healing, to the trauma we've experienced in this country. When you can't trust people who are in positions of power
Mm-hmm.
to honor us and care for us the way that we do.
And so I was thinking about this, right, from an aspect of, if my young girl, because I don't have any girls, I have all
Right,
boys just like you, but I have granddaughters.
right.
And I've noticed I have an affinity for these young women. It's almost like I feel like I have to protect them different. I don't
Yeah,
know if this is a good or a bad thing. So when we send our kids off to college, off to the world, when we're at home teaching them about life,
right.
we have to be aware of the bias between
Yes,
woman and man, right? We can't just use a blanket way of teaching both of them. We have to kind of change it up a little bit because
absolutely.
both can be vulnerable, but it seems like our young women is extremely vulnerable. And I see so many people who, Sonia, struggle with their teenagers.
Yeah,
Like, kids become teenagers and they go crazy sometimes, right? But
yeah,
what I noticed is what you put into them. Everybody listening to me,
absolutely.
what you put into them when they 5, 6, 7, and 8, all of this matters. So
All of
it
it.
should create a sense of ease when they become a teenager, because I
Yeah,
taught your ass what you need to
absolutely.
know. And I be telling my wife sometimes he needs to go outside. He's 15. He's 15 now. We've been talking to him about this country,
Yeah,
about school, about his future. I want him to try it on for size. I
yeah,
want him to go outside and see what I was talking about. See if it's true to you or not.
yeah.
But if it was a girl, would I do the same thing? You know
Yeah.
what I mean?
I mean, I think that I was really, really blessed. My parents were like, my mom was especially was insistent that we experience. If she's, I mean, she would often say, if you was a boy, you're gonna have the same freedoms that a boy would have.
Ah,
She,
ah.
I mean, but she didn't have boys, so she that never became something that she had to deal with.
Hmm,
However, she gave us the freedom to make a lot of decisions based on what our needs were, right?
hmm.
And there be no judgment about. And so I have a granddaughter. She's 17. I have a granddaughter who's 21. And both of them, yeah, you want to say that a girl is more fragile. Yes. I 100% agree. But I also believe, and I think that this goes along with that daddy grandpa love, the male thing when it comes to their girls of, no, she's mine and I got to protect her for as long as possible.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas my mother, because she was the head of the household for so long, we leaned to her, and she raised us in a way that was like, if I was your age, this is what I would have wanted my parents to do for me, so I'm going to give you that as a gift. But the minute that I can't trust you, things will change.
There we
And
go.
so I think that that's key to the conversation as well. Allow children an opportunity to be children. They are going to make mistakes. There are no perfect children. I tell people all the time, people, especially white folks, the lacking of melanated people in the world, they have said to my husband and I over the years, if we're out in public, if we're at a restaurant, oh, I could never bring my kids to a restaurant because they would just act. Your children are so well behaved. That ticks me off because I'm like, shouldn't your child know how to sit in a seat and eat dinner? Like, where are you failing? Because I don't feel like I need. But then, you put that earnest back on. Are we doing too much controlling of our children? Because they aren't perfect beings and they do have emotions. And then do white parents give their children an opportunity to express their feelings more, and we don't?
So we have to look at that.
Adults who don't know how to express their feelings, and they have pent up issues and rage and depression.
This is a systemic thing. I think this is why I grew up getting my ass whooped. I grew up thinking I had to put a belt to my son's ass, and I'm life and history and me learning. I said, okay, why do I do this? Where does it come from? Yeah, I believe in tough love, but we have to acknowledge the fact that the reason why we talked about this a little bit before, but in history, Black mothers in slavery dumbed down their sons.
Yes.
They knew their son was going to be 6'2" and a brute.
Yes.
I don't want them to take him. So look, sir, he's stupid. He's shiftless. You don't want him. These are the beginnings of us reining back our children. See, so now, because I was the same way, I have 5 children. Before my youngest kid, the 4 oldest, would be in the store with me. I'm in my 20s, and I'm not holding nobody's hand. Ain't nobody touching no candy, and everybody like, damn, why they not?
Because we got rules when we get in that
store. God in them, right? But
we get in that store, you don't touch nothing, you don't ask for nothing, you don't say nothing. You stay by that cart.
I get it to your ass, And then we see Timmy running around the store because his parents' experience with the world is different. They have a freedom with. You want to go touch that water faucet, son? You want to go touch that door? Feel free. Go do it. Where we like, no, stay right here.
Right.
And a piece of that is we used to knowing some type of authority figure is going to discipline you if I don't. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Now, another question.
That's super unfortunate because
it is,
like I said, my 17-year-old granddaughter at the moment, like she broke it down to me the other day. She was like, look, I'm a good student. I listen and I pay attention to all the things that y'all tell. I need more freedom. I want to hang out with my friends more, and I'm gonna need y'all to figure out how y'all gonna let me do that. And I was like, look, I was like, baby, I'm all for you having friends.
Yeah.
All for you going and experiencing life, because we're gonna have to learn a lesson one way or another. We can learn it early or we can learn it later.
Yep.
But we're gonna learn that lesson.
Mm-hmm.
The reality of it is you got to let them go gradually.
Mm-hmm.
And the sooner that you give them, let loose of those reins, the more that they can show you what they are capable of. And I just believe that because our babies have been thrown with so much stuff at them, they pick that up like this. And that's not a good thing as well, because remember, I've used the term adultification, that our children learn what responsibility is, and it takes away from their childhood.
So that's all things we need to talk about. And also, Sonia, so I have another question for you. So when we talk about, let's just say, and again, RIP to this young sister, Zkira Kemp, 20-year-old college student in Texas. Her mother sends her off for the weekend, and for the most part, she doesn't come back, and she has to get these horrific phone calls. So whether it was the system that had a play in it, based on negligence or some nefarious behavior, or just teenagers doing what they do, it's just I'm sorry to see that mom in that
Absolutely.
position. But so let's say she was drinking, Sonia,
Yeah.
and taking part in the things we know teenagers do. When do we begin talking to our kids about the dangers of them becoming a teenager? Drugs, women, sex, even
Yeah.
all of the pitfalls that can peer pressure,
Yeah.
all of the pitfalls that can come their way. When do you start, in your opinion, like putting those little nuggets of information into their mind so they can be prepared? You know what I mean?
I truly believe that. I mean, and I know that some folks in the Black community are going to be like, "Where you find this? Where this friend of yours come from, Harrison?" But I truly believe as soon as they are able to talk and they have questions about the things that they see, we
Hmm.
should be talking open and honestly with them, age appropriately, right? Right.
Yeah.
But I believe if a child comes to me who is 5 years old and says, I heard something about, sex, or mommy, what's a blunt,
Mm-hmm.
right? I think that we should be able to be honest with our children.
Hmm.
When they get older, they're going to have more detailed, more analytical questions based on the things that they observe. And here's the thing, Harrison, they're not living in the time that we lived in where, the internet is not free easily at their fingertips.
Hmm.
The outside world being a huge super influence into their
Hmm.
lives, they bring all of these things home.
Yep.
So, my 10-year-old, I'm like, look, excuse those who are of the Christian faith and think that it's inappropriate. Your penis can make a baby. It has sperm. We can have
Hmm.
these conversations, and a 10-year-old can understand that.
Yep.
Similarly, when a kid is of probably like 11, 12, they know what alcohol and drugs are by now
Hmm.
in this day and age.
Yep.
Maybe we didn't know what some of these things were at 10, 11, 12, but definitely by 14, 15, we knew some things were
Hmm.
awry, or that's different. That don't smell like a regular cigarette, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and so I firmly believe that if we are honest with children, they are more inclined to be honest with us.
There we
And
go.
leading from a no judgment zone. Like, we all ain't gonna be the same, and
Hmm.
we have differences. But at the same time, if you know your child, like all six of my boys are extremely different. My three granddaughters, oh my gosh, different night and day, right?
Mm.
I know that there's a different way that I have to communicate with all of them. I know that some of them I got to pull it out. Some of them we got to sit, and we just got to sit close to each other. And then I can ask some questions because they snuggled up. They feel like they're in a safe space. And
That's true.
other of my children, they're just like, they will make a phone call and be like, this is what's going on down. And I just wanted you to know. Right.
Yeah.
Um, but all of them are pretty honest with me about their behaviors that I question, right?
Hmm.
And so that also leans to where parents can have a good level of influence in their children's life, is being constantly communicating with them. And I,
Yeah.
reading from this article, she did everything right. Like, she had the GPS tracker
Yeah.
on.
She was tracking her. Yep.
So she was doing everything right. And so I hope that there are people in her inner circle who are in her ear telling her that this is not her fault, and that
Mm.
sometimes, things go crazy in the world that we cannot control. But, up to this point, we don't know if that baby girl,
Who knows what could have happened? Yeah. And her
right,
mom, she tracked the phone. They were
right,
communicating up until 4 days, and until that happened. I
yeah,
just would hate for any parent to be in that helpless type of position. But you speak to similar points that my wife does, just as far as she doesn't even believe in talking goo goo gaga.
yeah,
Like,
no,
not
oh,
one day. Like, she'd be talking to 1-year-olds,
oh no,
just not like, you're not elevating your speech, but everything is regular words. What do
yes,
you want? Where you going? What you
yes,
want to do? I didn't understand what you just said, right? And
right,
sometimes my spirit is like, well, no, treat him like a baby, give him a little room. But in reality, this is going to be a person who understands a lot
yes,
pretty soon here. So
yes,
yeah, if they bring up sex, if they bring up drugs, if they bring up the world, because
yes,
what it is the world you're
the
exposing them
world,
to,
absolutely,
you need to be prepared to answer these questions. And not because if you're fidgety and you become like unresponsive and uncom, kids can see that and they say, this must be something good.
Right. Let me
they
ask
don't
some
want to talk
questions
about it.
that. Tomorrow I'm gonna ask some questions about that. And next week. Yeah.
You see?
Yeah.
So all that's important. So RIP to this young sister. I hope her mother gets some resolve, but we need to begin talking to our kids as soon as possible. That level of communication, that's important, Sonia, because I was more of a dictator for a long amount of time. I wanted to just dictate and tell you what needed to happen, opposed to explain, allow you to communicate with me, and we can share that. So you don't have to depend so much on your peers. You see, because a lot of kids are like, I'm not talking to no adult around me, but I'll talk to my friends.
But I'll follow the crowd.
And
that's that's part of that communication piece and knowing who your child is too,
Yeah.
because it's unfortunate that we live in a time where it's so easy for the carrot to be dangled in front of them, and then they think that it's all shiny and glitz and stuff, and let me go try this, and then our babies end up being sex trafficked, or and they out there and we don't know where they are. There's a young lady who I currently am continuing to post a flyer on because she's been missing for about 22 days now.
I was just about to talk about that.
Right. Yeah. These are the things, but if we have those conversations about the glitz ain't always glamour,
Damn, it's funny you bring that up. Nakari Johnson is a young sister. Shout out to my brother Barry Axius, who'll be on the show next week, by the way. But my brother, he does a lot with just the children and things that are going on with the young people. He's been posting a lot about it. Their family has. And I'm always worried when I see that. And we got to understand that the police departments and the authority figures don't necessarily put their feet to the gas.
There's no
they know it's a black child now. And something else I'll be thinking about, like just on some real shit. So yes, you may have a child who ran off by themselves. You may have a nefarious act that took place with some adult that just snatched them. But we got to look at our culture sometimes too.
Yeah.
When I see a lot of young girls missing, I'm thinking, okay, not saying this young woman in general, but a lot of our young women, I'm saying, okay, how many of them are being exported into the pimp culture based on who they are as people and people taking advantage of their insecurities? So this can just be random acts of violence, but sometimes as our community, we got to look to the young men too. Like, wait, because now that I have granddaughters, I'm like, I don't want any of that type of activity taking place with my granddaughters. But hopefully she comes back home safe, because 20 some odd days,
that's a long time.
Is a long time. And to be honest, it's too common for me.
Yes.
I see a lot of those type of flyers, Sonia, and most of the times the young woman is found, but protecting these young people starts with like parents who believe in protecting.
Yes.
Parents who've created like a structure and a mechanism based on protection.
Right.
You know what I mean? So all that's important. Now, next thing I want to talk about. Me and Sonia have talked a lot about critical race theory. She's been a teacher, so we talk about a lot. We talk a lot about our history and Black history in schools and how schools should teach it. Like, we all are aware this is important based on all the lies that we've been told. Something I thought that was interesting, Sonia, in Florida, they wanted to introduce an AP African American Studies course for all high school students in Florida. So this is a course you can use that can help you with college. Like, the AP courses are important for your future, right?
Yes.
Governor Ron DeSantis, which we gonna talk about him in a minute and all the nefarious shit he be getting into, but he rejected it. You know what I mean? And they're basically saying, no, you can't learn this as an AP course. None of it is historically factual. And this is what got me. The board who reviewed if this can be done basically said, come back to us when y'all have historical references, when basically what you saying is true. And all of this African American, this AP African American Studies course was just based on our basic history,
right?
Civil rights,
right?
A little bit about Africa, but it was civil rights. It was all the people who've done things here in America. It was the politics that shaped America based on who we are. This should be okay in school, right?
It should be okay in school. In the best scenario where people are consciously aware that there is a history we have swept under the rug and not addressed, there is a fear factor that unfortunately comes in. There's this wonderful image of the young lady who was, she was in high school in Little Rock, Arkansas, and she was breaking the racial barrier line to go to Little Rock's high school at the time. And she was going to be one of like 5 students, and there were white folks in the crowd, and there was sheriff and police who were supposed to protect them, right, as these Black students integrated this white high school. And you can see this white woman in the background, young, you know, impressionable. I would venture to say unintending to be as vile as she was, because of the culture she was raised to believe that there should have been a separation of the races. Now, I say all that to say, imagine that white woman. I would venture to say she had to be anywhere between 16 to 26, 25. So young. And she's, let's say that she's now in her 80s, and she has to look her young grandchildren, great grandchildren in the face today and explain why it was a problem for that Black student to go to high school with white students. And so that's the fear, because we haven't addressed this as a society. The people who have been in the positions of power have failed the global community, right? We know that they failed Black folks, but you failed white folks too, because now you have elderly folks who are looking back at their past and saying, that's how it was back then. It ain't my fault that that's the way I was raised. And I would say you're right. It wasn't your fault the way that you were raised. But today, we got some responsibilities to do something different. When we know better, we have a responsibility to do better.
There we go.
So I am seeing a lot of young white, Hispanic, Asian folks who are not Black say to their parents who were raised a particular way not to trust Black folks, say, hold on, this is not right. And because it's not right, I'm going to push back just a little bit. So now tie that into the ways in which it's different when white families raise their children compared to Black families. So, you know, Billy Bob and them, they got the freedom to go and touch the water fountain and
like
and all that kind of stuff. They got those freedoms. Now they're of an age where they kids is looking at them like,
and this is a big problem, because this governor, Ron DeSantis, he signed legislation last year that basically restricted how racism and other aspects of history can be taught in school. So he don't want none of that shit being taught in school. And we're aware at this point that it's just a matter of hiding it from us. You know what I mean? So I bring these type of stories up because not enough of us read to our children.
Right.
Not enough of us take pride ourselves as adults.
Right.
As adults in the history that we've had in this country. So you're not teaching it to your kid, and you're not teaching it because you don't see the importance in it. I don't look. My son goes to a private school and we pay him, and it is a good school. But when it comes to our history, he's a part of a BSU organization now that he's thriving in. But as far as our history is concerned, I got that.
Right.
I know all the sources to go to get him the correct information. All of us need to be, because what I don't want at any time is a young Black person who is not aware of our history to a certain degree get in a situation where they're denied or they're treated unfairly. And when that shit just hits you in the face and ain't nobody told you about it in the correct way, you may end up going the coon route where I'm gonna do everything I can to placate to these white folks, or you may see it as something wrong with yourself, and you may see in your dark skin as an issue. You may start getting into a version of colorism yourself. You see what I'm saying? So Black folks, teach your kids about our history. First, you have to care. Yeah, I'm going to watch the game on Saturday too. Shit. For all the men out there. Yeah, I'm going to watch all them games too. But what you know about Mansa Musa?
Right.
I just posted something about Jack Johnson on TikTok. Now, TikTok is for the children. See, that's what I'm learning. TikTok's for the children, right?
Right. But they paying attention.
The biggest response I got from that post was from children on TikTok. Facebook and Instagram, yeah, they was there a little bit, but these kids is like, these young Black kids is like, yeah, I knew it was somebody before Floyd Mayweather.
Right.
I knew it was somebody before Mike Tyson. See? So these kids is eager to learn about our history, but if you a scared ass Black folks, if you a scared ass black parent, your kid know. Like we was talking about before, when your kid has a bout with racism at
Right.
all in their life, anything they deem if someone is treating them a certain way because of how they look, if you bypass that shit, they may start bypassing it for the rest of their life.
Right.
You see what I'm saying?
Absolutely. These are things that get internalized. And sometimes because we have been conditioned to stuff our feelings and emotions, and I'm specifically talking about us Black folks, we've been conditioned that we should stuff our feelings and emotion, go silently in pain with our trauma, and then become adults who lash out because we don't know when it comes out, or when we are triggered by something that reminds us of a trauma that we had as a child or as a young person. We don't know what to do with it. So, then we find ourselves in predicaments where either relationships break up, or we find ourselves in maybe violent situations because we don't know how to control that rage factor. But the reality of it is when we see our children asking questions, we should, if we don't know, go find out. Like,
there you go.
Just like these kids have the internet and everything at the tips of their fingers, so do we. So we can't fall back on that excuse of, I didn't grow up having access to all. We can't fall back on that. The same thing that they can Google, we can Google.
It's funny you say that, because like the last story we was mentioning, kids have to be taught certain things, and if we're not there to be open with them, then that leaves it open for society to pretty much take advantage. And like you was mentioning, everything, all the ills of our society is right on their phone. If it's not on their phone, it's right in front of their friend's face. So we need to figure out a way to talk to them about it, because if we looking at how we interact with society, racism is there, and we're gonna always put that at the forefront and make sure we understand that. But we got to take accountability for our children. Too many young Black people are going through the same things we went through when we were kids, the same things our parents went through. And we can look at the system, and we need to keep doing that. But parents, I mean, it's a very large responsibility that involves some intricate details that can help guide your kid to, in the right direction. So many young people we've known we think they would have been this or would have been that if they were in a different environment, if they had the resources like some of us or some other people had. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
So all this is important. Now, this is leading me into.
Hold on, because DeSantis, Mr. Ron,
go ahead. Go ahead.
of Florida, who is extreme. He has been proven to be a liar in a lot of things that relate to his personal life and how he got even to this position of governorship. A lot of people have been challenging his position and the fact that he shouldn't have even been sworn in as governor because he's such a shady character. He is very much a Trump supporter, but this decision, I just want to touch on this really quickly before we go to the next subject, because this decision, when we talk about advanced placement classes, these are college level classes. When students get to college, they are going to be exposed to this information. Why not give students who are able to keep up with an AP class? This is higher than an honors class. This is higher than college prep classes. They have to take a test at the end of their AP term to say that they have actually grasped the knowledge that is being taught in that class, so that they get extra credit within their GPA. So if you're saying that you don't want what Ron DeSantis is saying by rejecting this AP class is, I don't want my students to be in Florida to be prepared to go to college and compete with other states who have AP classes, who are going to be sitting in the same rooms. They won't be as prepared. And that's the question that I would ask every person who voted for Ron DeSantis. Do you have young people? And do you want them to go to college? And if you want them to go to college, will they be prepared to compete with students from all over this country and sometimes around the globe who come to our colleges to even have these kind of conversations? Or are you going to send them in blind? Because that goes back to, how are we parenting our children? You sending them blind out into the world that might devour them, when you can actually do something to prevent some of the shell shock of
The shell
what.
shock. Yeah. Yeah. Because the DeSantis guy, he also didn't want critical race theory taught in Florida because he said he didn't want the white students to feel guilty. He didn't want them to feel like it was their fault. I'm
Right.
like, how dare these
How dare you?
politicians? You know what I mean? That's
And
why
this
it's
is
so
the
hard to
same
trust them.
governor who said, I really don't know what critical race theory is,
But
but I
I
just
but I
know it's
fucking know.
not good for us, right? How? I mean, he's banning things on Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.
Mhm.
Like, you want to take out everything that could potentially teach about blacks because you have a fear and you have a something within you that says that I'm not going to be okay when we learn more of, if our kids learn more about black history. So
Mhm.
it's a mess. My kids say, I told my 17-year-old who's a senior in high school the other day, I said, one of the schools you need to consider applying to is Florida A&M. And he said, oh no, we're not going to Florida. They weird in Florida. And I'm like, please. He said they are back. Their politics is backwards. Their culture is back. And I had to sit and listen because they get this information from the TikTok, from the YouTube. They get
Yes.
this information. And when you see votes like this and you see politicians like this, my son is like, I will not be going to Florida. And I can't necessarily blame him.
Yeah, and then kids are creating their own ideology about the world, but they're lining it up with what you've said or not said.
Right.
They're lining it up with what you've taught them, what you haven't said, but because sometimes, it's not just about talking. Sometimes you can
Right.
say something to your kid without saying. They peeping all of
Absolutely.
this, and this
All
is
of it.
important because then they'll be open with you. You know what I mean? You don't want them
Absolutely.
not being comfortable talking about race or talking about these topics because you find it taboo and you don't want white folks to hear. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Now, something that me and Sonia have spoke about before, but not only is it important for our history, but it's just very intriguing to me. When we look at the ghettos in America, we know that they were created through redlining. Like we know that they were created through redlining. We know that um, um, a lot of the neighborhoods, the white neighborhoods, had procedures that they followed that made sure we weren't allowed in the hood, like sundown towns, all
Yeah.
these type of things, right? But
Yes.
also, what everybody should know, like in 1956, President Eisenhower created an interstate highway system that basically that put a divide between the ghetto and majority of the white neighborhoods. You know what I mean? And this is because when I started reading about this, Sonia, I didn't realize how many
Deep.
highways in this country it affected the city that we're in Sacramento. We have a 99 freeway that goes right through the middle of the city. Well, this freeway was created to separate
Yep.
the white and the black people from each other. And I think one of the biggest forms of racism that I think is a travesty in our country, Sonia, is the fact that we don't live around each other. I think that's a big key to why we don't get along the way we do, because white flight and creating systems where if you know Negroes is coming, you're gonna move out.
Right.
That's been the way for generations and centuries, really. So when you see something like this, why do you think it's important that we look at like how our transportation system was created? Like, because sometimes they tell us quit dwelling on these type of things, but it
Can't.
is important, right?
I cannot and I will not. Let me quickly, as fast as possible, tell you the story of my mother. She grew up in the city of Chicago. She grew up in a neighborhood that was very similar to Black Wall Street in Tulsa, Oklahoma. They had her neighbors were Black doctors, Black bankers, Black dentists, Black store owners, Black everybody. All of her friends that she anticipated going to kindergarten with were on her block.
Hmm.
She lived in a tri-level brownstone in Chicago. Beautiful neighborhood. I've seen old pictures of this neighborhood. And it was the neighborhood that was chosen to be bulldozed and destroyed when the freeway system was built in Chicago. So
Hmm.
two things happened. One, it was either we want to separate communities and we want a demarcation, a line of demarcation to say this is the good side of town and this is the bad side of town, which
Mhm.
will then allow for redlining to be easier when we
Yep.
look at a map. We just box off this, right? But the second part about that is because her community was completely destroyed, there were probably two families within a 13 block radius in her community that held out. And the city had to, They paid them a little bit more, but they paid all these
Mhm.
families. My
Yep.
mother ended up in the projects.
Ain't that something? And talking about Chicago, Chicago is probably if not the most, one of the most
Yes,
segregated cities in this country. And we look at the
still
race
today.
wars in the different instances, the thing you just spoke about. People need to realize, like, I'm all about holding my people accountable, but the systematic endeavors that have put us in the position we're in,
Yes,
it's on autopilot now. It's
yes,
no wonder Chicago, we looking at the murder rate and how the murders they be doing in any given weekend. Some of those numbers can be flawed, but the bottom line is these places are segregated. And
yes.
then you pull out all the resources, leave the black people to fend for themselves, and wonder why there's crime and poverty and all types of degradation. It's really what you created for us. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I tell the story of my mother growing up in the projects in my first book, Monsters and Aliens, because
Mhm.
the way she described moving from her Black community where she felt safe to play outside at age 5, and the anticipation, the joy that she, wanted to go to school and be around her friends that she knew and grew up with, to being her family being ushered into a literal concrete jungle. I can remember being a kid and we would go back to Chicago to visit, and the walls were concrete,
Mm.
cold. Just to me, everything was hard. And
Yeah.
there was no sense of safety. The hallways smelled like urine. The hallways were dark because the lights were often shot out, because if we are going to commit a crime in those hallways, we at least don't want people to recognize who we are if we're coming and going. um,
Hmm.
as a girl growing up in the projects, she grew up, the first apartment that they had in the projects was on the 12th floor. And that apartment, she couldn't her parents, they had a code system. They had 4 children, 2 boys, 2 girls, and the boys were required to go down to the bottom floor to get their sisters, if their sister can come home with them from school, for
Mm.
safety reasons. Oftentimes the elevator didn't work in these buildings, so
Yep.
you are having people carry their groceries, their work tools up and down stairs to survive, and then sometimes it not being safe for you to do that. They had
Mhm.
a friend family on the 3rd floor, and it was a privilege. The longer you stayed in the projects, every year you can apply for a lower that's like
Yeah,
you
that's
remember
true.
the
Yep.
show The Jeffersons, and they said we moving on up to an east side apartment in the sky. In the projects, the better position you were in is the lower the level of the floor that you lived on.
Yep.
So these are the dangerous situations that this government has said, we don't value your life. And so when we take from you, destroy your communities, destroy your schools that are working perfectly well. See, we have to remember segregation. When we asked for money to fund Black schools and Black communities and politicians at that time were not asking for integration. They were asking for equal access to resources. So if
Hmm.
you're giving that school over there X amount of dollars, you should be giving our school over here the same amount of dollars. And so now that it's all jumbled up and mixed up together, redlining became that easy fix to how we can divert
Hmm.
the resources from certain communities.
Hmm. And another thing, before we get off this topic, Sonia, because this is really, really interesting to me. Can we flip the hood? Can we have like individuals in neighborhoods that are destitute, but
Yeah,
change the way they think?
yeah,
So let's say I don't make a lot of money, but I'm gonna take pride in my home. Like I'm gonna make sure if it's grass, I'm gonna cut the grass.
right.
I'm gonna look at the outside of it and take pride in it that way. You know what I mean? Because sometimes it's almost like you can link poverty in the amount of money someone has with how they treat things to a
Yeah.
degree. You see what I'm saying? So we looking at them having cars on the grass and all this kind of shit. I'm like, okay, is this based on the system and the mentality it put us in?
Right.
Or is it like how you are operating on autopilot, and because you may have not had to put a lot of money into whatever it is you're looking at, you chose not to care about it the correct way. You know what I mean?
I hear that, and I hear that, but I want to push back a little bit, because I don't know too many Black folks who, even if they're scraping by and they spent their money on something that they need to survive, are just going to let it be dilapidated by choice.
Mm.
So when I look at neighborhoods that are, falling apart a little bit, and there's not a lot of structural input and upkeep,
Mm-hmm.
I always still see hardworking people coming home every day,
Definitely.
even if it's by public transportation. And they got to walk up to their door. If they're
Mm-hmm.
driving up to their driveways, I see a pride in the little bit that we have. And that goes back to slave times. I've heard story after story after story. Having a degree in history and attending a historically Black college, I had the privilege of reading WPA reports, which were basically slave stories. They went around at the time of emancipation and they interviewed former slaves. What was life like on your plantations? Tell us the name of the owner. How did y'all upkeep? And the sense that I get that still exists today, especially with Black folks, is that we are extremely prideful for what we have. So even
Definitely.
if the energy around what we have is negative, you step on a Black person's Jordan, what's going to happen?
Yeah, and then like
Because
some of the, even when my family living in New Orleans, most of my family lived in the project environments, and they would always tell me, like, when these projects were first built, like they were beautiful and all
right.
this type of stuff. And then when you go in their house, the upkeep in their house is beautiful. You know what I mean? It smell good,
Meticulous.
the feng shui. Yeah, yeah, yeah. You know what I mean? You know what I mean? So we've always had pride. I just think like the lack of resources in our
Yeah,
environment at times, it kind of weighs on you. You
absolutely.
may you know what I mean? It kind of weighs on you and make you um become one with the environment. Like,
Yeah,
okay, fuck it, I'm gonna just throw something on the ground because I see
yeah,
everything's on the ground. You know what I mean? So,
absolutely.
but you're absolutely right. I just wanted to get your take on that. But you're absolutely right. I know a lot of Black folks, even to today, regardless of where they live, they have a pride in it. But I know too, some of that is some of the older generations too.
Yeah,
We need to
yeah,
make sure we pass that on to the young
absolutely.
people to make sure they understand everything is a mentality. Like,
Yeah,
you aren't your environment. Just
you
because
aren't.
things are a certain way, you
Yeah.
don't have to participate. You can still be prideful. You know what I mean?
Very much so, very much so. And I think that, yeah, generation to generation, we have lost some of that aspect of who we are. And that pride piece, it's not just about the things that we have. You mentioned it earlier about colorism. It's a pride in who we are. And
Hmm.
if we don't feel like we can trust us, then we look for trust and safety in other folks, and we can get into other conversations, because we
Yep.
have, in regards to where we work at, where we live at, who we
Mhm.
end up as our mates, who are our friends. And then we have those rude, unpleasant awakenings when we encounter law enforcement or people who are in positions of power,
Yes.
because they look at the color of our skin, and all of it
Mhm.
comes rumbling back like, why you let all that go to go over here and think that it's going to be better?
Yep.
So the pride piece is so incredibly important. And I'm just grateful that I'm able to like bridge the gap between generation from, generation, to be able to say, well, hold up. Back in the day, Big Mama and them said, take your shoes off at the door. Hold up. Big Mama and them had plastic on the furniture.
So
Hold up.
now did.
We had them plastic runners that ran down because we had a pride in how we take care of our living spaces. And
Yep.
I, when you say we've kind of gotten away from that a little bit, I'm guilty. I'm
Mhm.
so guilty. I warn people when they come into my house, I'd be like, we live in a lived in house. And so it is not perfect, and I am not going to make my children be perfect, but
Mhm.
it's not so dirty that you can't sit yourself on my couch. And
Mhm.
yeah, we're not doing that.
Yeah, no, that's important. And even looking at like how we view the getting together process.
Yeah.
I mentioned a lot that my family owns the funeral home, and one of the biggest things that
Right.
people talk about at these services is the fact that we don't get together enough. The fact that they're looking at 17 people, maybe more, in the audience or whatever, in the crowd at the funeral home, who they haven't seen in 6, 7, 8, 9,
Forever.
10 months, maybe a year. You know what I mean? When my family first got here from the South, family reunions levels of get-togethers was
High.
higher on the priority list, because what we need to all, and I'm guilty, like you just said, I'm extremely guilty of this. We're
Yeah.
actually just prioritizing shit. None
Yes.
of us are that busy.
No.
No, no, none of us are that busy. So you're putting priority. You can just want to do something with your little family in your house. You can have some work stuff to do. You can want to relax on the weekend or whatever. We used to say, no,
No.
we're going to get together on this day and be
Yeah.
around each other, because relationships, everybody need to realize relationships are based on being familial. You
They
have
take
to be
work.
around somebody.
Yes, they take work. They
They
take
take
effort.
work. Yes.
Absolutely. It's a shame that's become, we've been so, and again, I always tie these things back to the system, that's the greater global system that's kind of preventing us from. So once upon a time in the Black community, because we worked 9 to 5 Monday through Friday, and everything else was usually closed on a Sunday, and there were limited hours on a Saturday, that forced us and gave us extra time. But we live in such a fast-paced society now where we're saying, no, I want 24-hour access on a Monday through Friday. We're going to work our employees on a Saturday and Sunday to be more efficient, to
Yep.
make more money for the big
Yep.
boss, and it doesn't trickle down. And so that leaves people who are in positions of poverty to say, oh yeah, I'll take that shift on a Sunday, even though my family gets together and we have traditionally done that all my life. And then that removes me from that scenario. And so part of it is not our fault. I think that because we've been put in such a precarious situation to try to survive in this country, sometimes we got to, rob Peter to pay Paul. And sometimes robbing Peter means that I'm robbing myself of that connection to the people that mean the most to me.
Oh man, ain't that something? That survival mode.
Yeah.
So yeah, that being in that survival mode is one of the most detrimental state of minds that we have in our community.
Absolutely.
And you're right, we don't get together. But what I will say, we always talking to us, like specifically, but some things aren't just about black and white. Like
No.
other races of people don't get together as much as they used to or need to as well. You'll be
true.
surprised. Get around some white folks and they hate all their cousins. Your ass ain't coming to the party because I'm embarrassed of your ass. You know what I mean? The family dynamic is what it is.
Yeah.
Across color lines, but it seems like when we take the stance of like wallowing in dysfunction, it hurts us more.
Yeah.
It seems like it hurts us because of the generations, in the wealth gap, in the money. Yes. Money is important in this country. And if you come from poverty and you have to deal with this system, it makes things worse. You know what I mean? So definitely important for me to point that out. So everybody know, again, the ghettos you live in were created, the highways that you look at that are really beautiful. A lot of them, not all, but a lot of them were created just to separate you from the white people. And yes, I live in a community where there's a lot of different races. There's white, Asian, Arab, everything. But a lot of us get into situations where we live in a community where it's all white and it's just us or just 2 or 3 people. Because what we don't want to realize is if you have an all white community and it's maybe a couple black folks on the street, if there's 5 empty houses and all 5 of them houses are occupied by new black residents, all them white folks is getting the fuck out. So this country needs to realize, why don't you guys want to live around black folks? How about we get to the bottom of that? Because ain't nothing different between them and you. Ain't nothing different between them and you. Like, stop the bullshit. We're not inherently nothing that you not. Don't let me get into y'all ass. So we need to back up because I see you in the grocery store. I see you at the movies, but we ain't really living around each other. You know what I mean?
It's so important.
Yep.
It's so unfortunate.
Definitely. So everybody, thank you very much for tuning in to another episode of the Melanated Convo podcast. My sister Sonia Williams-Lewis. Every Thursday at 7 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, we talk about news stories. We talk about what's going on in the culture. I don't get too gossipy. I see things going on with people getting divorced and it's my spirit, man. I'm gonna talk because I like to have fun. I'm a jokester, but I'm gonna bring up stuff based on how I feel in my spirit. None of it's gonna be just to get clicks and views. No, that's not what I'm doing this for. You feel me? So this has been another episode of the Melanated Convo podcast. Follow me on Instagram at melanatedconvo100. Sonia, tell everybody, where can they follow you online?
Absolutely. On all of the social platforms, you can find the business at Ascribe Success. You can find us on Facebook and Instagram at Ascribe Success. On TikTok, I think I'm just Sonia. I'm Sonia did that. Like, so people have always, I've been very outspoken as a young person and throughout my entire life. And so people have deemed me Sonia said it. Right. So I might say something that's going to make you pause. And so Sonia said it is who I am on Instagram. But on TikTok, it's Sonia did that because I want to be more interactive. You had mentioned that you saw one of my TikTok videos about my work week. And so last week it was so funny because we got 3 calls in, 2 nonprofits and a school who were literally asking for the same kind of services. But what I have to realize is that even though they're asking for the same things, their business and their structure and their culture is very different. And because people are at different places in life, we want to make sure that we tailor what we bring to them to what their needs are. And so it might be workplace, disagreements. It might be a pay gap that needs to be addressed. It might be who and why is the person that is the gatekeeper holding the keys. Or it could be simply for the first time ever, like one of the nonprofits, we want to intentionally get all of our staff together so that we can be under the same roof and feel the energy of each other to build a different culture and change the narrative. And so all of those things are what I do with Ascribe Educational Consulting. You can find me go to my website, which is ascribesuccess.com.
There we go. There we go. So everybody keep that in mind, right? Because this sister has the experience, and we're in a new age where companies and institutions are realizing this is some shit we've never even thought about. We've never seriously and genuinely looked at your community as an asset and considered what you're going through. Because sometimes I fall into learning about our history and finding, like, I love it, so I'm always looking up stuff. But I can know something that I've been knowing for 5 or 6 years, and I present it to somebody, and they act like, and they like, damn, wait, what? That happened? I'm like, okay, so I got to remember that everybody don't know what I know. Like I have to continue to introduce things. That's why I bring things back up, because people mention it, and we want to enlighten everybody. Like, I don't want to have this racism problem, but I ain't for all this shit.
Right.
Like, you ain't talking to me how you want to talk to me. I'm not going for none of that. I would have ran away. I was the runaway. You know what I mean? That's who I would have been. So we're creating a new version of that in 2023 because we're still going through a lot of the same shit. So this is your brother Harrison, man. Sonia Williams Lewis. I appreciate everybody tuning into another episode of the Melanated Convo podcast. Me and my sister will be back next Thursday, 7 p.m. Continue to follow the show on all the digital platforms. I appreciate everybody who watches and listens. Your comments and your energy isn't forgotten. I'm noticing everything. So I appreciate you guys. Another episode of the Melanated Convo podcast. We out.